$500,000. I posed as my brother to care for his blind fiancée. The day she regained her sight, I left without a word. We met again at a business interview. I was an intern reporter. She had reclaimed her status as the powerful heiress of the Hayes family. She was in the middle of the interview. "We hear that during your illness, your fiancé, Mr. Thompson, was by your side the entire time. Is it true that wedding bells are in your future?" A faint smile touched her lips as she raised a hand, revealing a ring. "Yes," she said. "He and I are getting engaged soon." But her eyes, whether by chance or design, drifted to where I stood in the corner. Before the interview began, the room was buzzing. The heiress we're interviewing today is the one calling the shots at the entire Hayes Corporation. I heard she went blind 5 years ago and was even cast out of the family. If her fiancé hadn't stuck by her, she probably wouldn't have survived. "Phew, keep your voice down." I sat off to the side, struggling to maintain a smile while my nails dug painfully into my palms. Suddenly, my mentor, Mr. Wallace, turned to me. "Sonny, could you go grab me a glass of water?" I had just reached the water cooler near the entrance when the main doors swung open. A woman walked in, and my mind went completely blank. In 3 years, the change in Candy Hayes was nothing short of staggering. Her once delicate frame was now tall and poised, the lines of her face softer, more mature. "Excuse me," she said coolly, her eyes glancing past me as if I were a complete stranger. There was no hint of recognition. Flanked by several bodyguards, she walked toward the stage. I remained frozen as she passed me. A few seconds later, it hit me. During the 2 years I spent with her, Candy was at her absolute lowest. She had been disowned by the Hayes family and blinded in a car accident. Of course, she had no idea what I looked like. It was better this way. By the time I returned with the water, the interview was already underway. Candy sat on the stage, her gaze sweeping over the audience with calm composure. She was fielding questions about her business strategies when suddenly, a side door near the stage opened. My brother, Chris Thompson, walked in, smiling apologetically at Candy. "Sorry, Candy," he said. "Something came up on set, so I'm a little late." He straightened his suit jacket and took a seat beside her. The room fell silent for a beat before erupting in a low, excited murmur. Mr. Wallace took a sip of water and glanced at me, his eyes wide as if he'd made a great discovery. "You know, Sonny, you and Chris Thompson actually look a little alike." I pursed my lips and managed a weak smile. "He's a famous actor. You're giving me too much credit. Of course we looked alike. We were brothers. We hear that during your illness, Mr. Thompson here was your unwavering support. Are wedding bells in the near future?" My throat constricted. I stared at Candy on the stage. She smiled faintly and raised her left hand, showing the ring on her fourth finger. It was a simple, unadorned silver band. It was the one I had bought with money from a part-time job, just to make her happy. The prestigious heiress of the Hayes family wearing such an inexpensive ring looked completely out of place. She traced its surface with her fingertip. "Yes," she confirmed, "he and I are getting engaged soon." As she spoke, her gaze swept over the audience below. Deliberately or not, it landed on me in a corner. After just a few seconds, she pulled her eyes away. The microphone was then passed to Chris. "Mr. Thompson, we hear you're currently filming with director Lang. He's known for not casting new actors. Did Ms. Hayes' influence play a part in that?" He smiled and admitted it freely. "Of course. I've always been confident in my own abilities, but I won't deny that Candy has done a great deal for me, and I believe I'm worthy of her support." His confident and gracious attitude won over the crowd. Someone then asked, "Could you share a little about how you and Ms. Hayes supported each other through that difficult time?" The smile on Chris's face froze. In the eerie silence that followed, time itself seemed to slow. After a long moment, Candy gave a soft laugh and took the microphone. "There's not much to tell. The memories we share are for us alone." My eyes suddenly burned. I gripped the pen in my hand, lowering my head in a fluster. Whenever I closed my eyes, the past would rush back. As a teenager, Candy's rebellious nature had made her more than a few enemies. After she lost everything, some of them came looking for payback. I was protecting her when they pushed me down a flight of stairs. I was covered in blood. The sight scared them off, and they scrambled away. I gritted my teeth, got to my feet, and walked back to her, trying to act as if nothing had happened. "Let's go home," I said. But Candy suddenly grabbed my hand. "You're hurt. We need to go to the hospital. I'm Phoenix. I can smell blood." Her voice cracked, tears spilling from her clouded, unseeing eyes. But when she spoke, it was my brother's name she called. Chris, when I get better, I'm going to give you the most magnificent wedding the world has ever seen. After the interview, the sky had turned a grim gray. A fine mist of rain was falling outside. Mr. Wallace patted his pockets and turned to me. Sonny, I left the memory card inside. Can you run back and grab it? I jogged back across the wet pavement. The elevator dinged, arriving at the ground floor. The next second, the doors slid open. I came face to face with the two people inside. Chris had his head tilted slightly, chatting with Candy about some trivial on-set anecdote. Her expression was neutral, but she was listening patiently. They looked intimate. The moment Chris saw me, his expression soured. Sorry, I mumbled. I offered a muffled apology and turned to take the stairs instead. But a voice behind me said, wait. I froze. You needed the elevator, didn't you? Get in. I turned back slowly, deliberately keeping my voice low. Thank you, Ms. Hayes. She told me to get in, but didn't move to make room, her eyes fixed on me. You were one of the reporters today? I don't recall you asking any questions. I lowered my gaze. Ms. Hayes, I just graduated and came back to the States. I'm only an intern, so I don't have questioning privileges yet. I see. She replied softly, her thoughts unreadable. Beside her, Chris shot me a venomous look. We should get going, Candy. We have that meeting with Director Lang tonight. Candy finally broke her gaze from me. Let's go. I stood alone in the ascending elevator, lost in thought. After my parents divorced, my father took Chris and married into the wealthy Miller family. For as long as I could remember, I hadn't seen Chris. Then, 5 years ago, he suddenly found me. I'll give you $500,000, he said, to take my place and look after someone for me. At the time, my mother had just died from a long illness, leaving behind a mountain of medical debt. I had no other choice, so I agreed. It was only when we met that I learned who I was supposed to care for. Candy Hayes, the heiress of the Hayes family. She was also his fiancée, who had suffered a terrible accident not long after their engagement was announced. She's blind and a disowned heiress. Who would want to be saddled with that? He'd said with a look of pure disgust. If I wasn't worried about my public image, I would have called off the engagement ages ago. Back then, Chris was just starting his acting career. He had landed a great role and was on the verge of stardom. Afraid of being labeled as callous, he dumped the unpleasant task on me. Candy had lived a charmed life for 18 years before disaster struck. Her temper became volatile. When I first started caring for her, she constantly met me with cold, sarcastic remarks. I was being paid, so I never argued back. Until one day, I visited my mother's grave and got back a little late. She started lashing out again. Chris, stop putting on an act for me. Don't think I don't know you can't stand me. You're only here because you're afraid of what people will say if you. She never got to finish the sentence, because I suddenly leaned down and kissed her. It was my first kiss, clumsy and artless. Fueled by a flicker of anger, it was less a kiss and more a desperate, biting clash. But Candy fell silent. The tips of her ears flushed a deep red. You, she started. I felt a surge of malice and bit her lip again, gently this time. I pulled back just enough to look at her, my hands on her shoulders, my breathing ragged. Did you feel that? Do you still think I can't stand you? I found Mr. Wallace and gave him the memory card. He was pleased. Sonny, you're a hard worker. Perfect timing, there's a dinner tonight, and I'll take you along to network. For a journalist, connections are everything. I thanked him profusely, but when we arrived, I saw a familiar black Rolls-Royce in the parking garage. I froze. Is Ms. Hayes here tonight? Wallace turned and winked. The dinner I'm taking you to is with Ms. Hayes. Don't underestimate my connections, Sonny. It was too late to back out now. I had no choice but to follow him inside. Fortunately, the private dining room was spacious. Junior reporters like us weren't seated at the main table with Candy and her entourage. Wallace took me around, introducing me to industry veterans. This is our newest hire, a sharp kid named Sonny Thompson. Sonny, say hello. As the rookie, I had to make the round with toasts. By the end of it, the room was spinning. I barely managed to excuse myself before I was running for the restroom. A hand clamped over my mouth. I was violently ill. After rinsing my mouth and splashing cold water on my face, I stepped back out into the dimly lit hallway. A familiar silhouette stood in the shadows by the window. My heart hammered against my ribs. My first instinct was to pretend I hadn't seen her and walk away. I took one step, and then she spoke. Her voice was a low murmur, laced with 1,000 complex emotions as she spoke my name, syllable by syllable. Sonny. Thompson. My feet stopped dead in their tracks. I swallowed hard, listening to the unhurried sound of her footsteps drawing closer. I squeezed my eyes shut. The footsteps stopped right in front of me, and her familiar scent enveloped me. I opened my eyes to find her staring at me, her own eyes as deep as the ocean. Ms. Hayes, I managed my throat tight with nerves. How do you know my name? She didn't answer right away, just studied me for a long moment before straightening up. Your mentor was introducing you all over the room. Everyone here knows your name. Thinking of Wallace's booming voice, I felt my face grow warm. I'm sorry. He's just very supportive of the new hires, maybe a little overzealous. If we disturbed you, Ms. Hayes, I apologize. I tried to explain, worried I might have gotten Wallace in trouble. But Candy was silent again. Under the warm light, she narrowed her eyes, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. In your eyes, Mr. Thompson, do I seem like a petty person? I kept my head down. That's not what I meant, I mumbled. The next moment, a business card with gold foil lettering was held out in front of me. You're still an intern, correct? I have a job opportunity for you. Interested? When I got back to the table, my head was still spinning. Wallace immediately pulled me aside. You okay, Sonny? I rubbed my aching stomach. Sorry, Wallace. I had stomach surgery a while back, so I can't really handle my liquor. He frowned, looking like he was about to say something. Then his gaze fell to the card in my hand. His eyes widened in disbelief. Is that Candy Hayes' personal card? I nodded, my mind replaying the encounter. It was her personal card, the one people said was impossible to get, with her direct contact information. You don't get something for nothing. I looked up at her warily, remembering to keep my voice disguised. Why would you give such a valuable opportunity to an unknown reporter? A small smile played on her lips. Perhaps I just like the look of you. That sounded exactly like the Candy I remembered. During those 2 years I cared for her. As we grew closer, she would let her rebellious side show, especially at certain moments. I'd grit my teeth, swallowing a groan, my hand tangled in her hair. You can't see, so stop moving around so much. In the dim light, she would tilt her head up, soft bangs brushing against her unfocused eyes. She'd lick her lips, her fingers pressing lightly against the back of my neck. My other senses are fine, she'd whisper. So you need to be a little louder. I want to hear you. I snapped back to the present and gave Wallace a vague excuse. The next day at the office, my boss called me into his office. He was all smiles. Sonny, you know that hit reality dating show that's streaming live? I need you to prep. You'll be going on as a special guest commentator. It turned out that the guests for the next episode were none other than Chris and Candy. After that first press conference, their story had blown up. The news of their engagement was trending all over Twitter, serving as the perfect promotion for the show. The comments were filled with fans losing their minds. They went through the worst together, and now they're at the top. It's a perfect love story. I heard the Miller family's company was on the brink of collapse, but the Hayes Corporation propped them up, and now they're thriving again. The ultimate power couple. If you don't ship them, you have no soul. I skimmed the comments and quickly closed the app. The host, Diane, was reviewing her script while making small talk with me. If we can get the real story of what happened with Ms. Hayes and her fiancé during those 2 years, it would be ratings gold. I tightened my grip on my pen and quietly agreed. Every single detail of what happened during those 2 years, I knew it better than anyone. But I couldn't say a word. Backed by the Hayes family's resources and connections, Chris was now a bona fide A-list celebrity. The moment the show went live, millions of viewers flooded the stream. Under the bright studio lights, I heard Diane begin. So, we hear wedding plans are underway. Could you share a little about your journey as a couple? Chris turned to Candy with a gentle smile. All those terrible rumors that were spread about her back then, I never believed a single one. In my eyes, Kenny has always been the one I love. He gazed at her, his eyes practically overflowing with adoration. But Candy just lowered her lashes and let out a soft laugh. Liar, have you forgotten how much you couldn't stand me right after I went blind? Chris froze. His eyes darted towards me, and for a second, I saw a flash of malice. But with the cameras on him, he had to force a smile. I don't really remember that. I suppose as our love grew, I've only held on to the sweet memories. I glanced at the live comments scrolling on the monitor behind me. The screen was flooded with messages like "so sweet." I set down my script, gripped my microphone, and directed a question to Candy. It seems you two remember things a bit differently. Perhaps you could tell us how you managed to work through those initial difficulties. I didn't think she would answer. But after a moment of silence, Candy began to speak. Right after it happened, I was devastated. I hated the world, and I didn't like him very much either. He was working long hours but still had to take care of me in his spare time. One day, he was completely overwhelmed. He left fish stewing on the stove, ran downstairs to buy salt, and forgot to turn off the burner. By the time he got back, the kitchen was on fire. My throat felt tight, as if something was caught in it. In a haze, I was transported back to that evening. I could almost feel the residual heat from the flames hanging in the air. I had dragged Candy out of the smoke-filled apartment. I grabbed her by the collar, my voice shaking as much as my hands. "Were you trying to kill yourself?" She didn't fight back with her usual sharp retorts. Instead, she was quiet for a long time before asking in a raw, hoarse voice, "Wouldn't it be better if I died? Wouldn't that be a relief for you?" It was in that moment that I suddenly saw it. The once proud and untouchable Candy Hayes was now just a lost, broken girl putting on a brave face. Gasping for breath, I pushed her back into the bedroom. The walls were scorched black. I undid the buttons of her shirt, one by one. "You burned my dinner," I whispered. "You'll have to be my compensation." She seemed to realize what was happening. "Are you sure?" The rest of her words were lost as I kissed her, hard and deep. "Candy," I breathed against her lips, "I never thought you were a burden." That night, the world had fallen away, leaving only the two of us. And now, here she was telling that story. But the man sitting beside her, the fiancé who supposedly shared that memory, was Chris. The entire world believed it was their memory. A suffocating, bitter ache spread through my chest. From this distance, I could smell her perfume, a scent both familiar and foreign, wrapping around me, overwhelming my senses. But it no longer belonged to me. She paused, and as the audience applauded, she finished her story. "I'll never forget the moonlight that night. It was so bright you could see everything. I couldn't see it, but he described it to me all night long." I gripped my pen, quickly lowering my head as my eyes began to sting. Because I had gone off script with my questions, we uncovered details no one had ever heard before. The interview was a massive success. By the end of the show, viewership had broken 10 million. It was the first time anyone had gotten details about that hidden chapter of the Hayes heiress's life. Everyone was buzzing. Backstage, Diane clapped me on the shoulder. "That was brilliant journalism. Those impromptu questions were so sharp, they had no choice but to answer." Just then, I turned and saw Candy and Chris approaching. Diane immediately fell silent. Candy's cool gaze landed on me. "Were those your questions today?" I nodded. Chris's voice was deceptively smooth. "Mr. Thompson, you certainly have a knack for hitting a nerve. But I should remind you to maintain a sense of professional ethics. Don't get any ideas about things that are out of your league." I said nothing, my eyes shifting back to Candy. Her expression was sharp as she said coolly, "Mr. Thompson is very capable. From now on, he will be our primary media liaison." Chris's head snapped in my direction. His eyes were filled with a mixture of fear and pure hatred. Later, he cornered me in an empty hallway, his expression a mask of disgust. "Sonny Thompson, you're just insatiably greedy, aren't you? You took my money and disappeared. What the hell are you doing back here now?" I looked at him calmly. "I graduated. I came back to start my career." It was a simple statement. "Career? Sonny, do you take me for an idiot?" He suddenly exploded, his voice a furious shout. "Get the hell out of here. Tell her you're turning down the liaison job, or I'll make your life a living hell." I ignored him and walked away. Chris was true to his word. Suddenly, I was hitting roadblocks everywhere. Opportunities that should have been mine were suddenly given to other people at the last minute. Then, one evening just before closing time, my boss called me into his office. "Next month is our most important annual development conference. I want you to host it." I was stunned for a moment. "It was Ms. Hayes," he explained. "She specifically asked for you." After work, I saw it parked across the street from my office building, a very familiar Rolls-Royce. The window rolled down, revealing Candy's impassive face. "Mr. Thompson, since you're so curious about my past, why don't you ask me about it directly?" I looked down. "I have no intention of prying, Ms. Hayes. It was purely for work. Even for work, I gave you my personal card. You could have contacted me." I pressed my lips together. There was no need, because in that moment, it hit me with full force that 3 years had passed. She was the powerful CEO of the Hayes Corporation, not the fiery girl who would cling to me for comfort and kisses after one of her outbursts. The Miller family's influence was waning. Without Candy's tacit permission, Chris would never dare to target me so openly, which meant, perhaps, for her, that part of her past was a humiliation she wanted to forget. I turned to leave, but Candy called out, "Stop." She pushed open the car door and stepped out, blocking my path. "Mr. Thompson, can we talk?" My voice was hoarse. "What would you like to talk about, Miss Hayes?" A faint smile touched her lips, and her eyes held a hint of resignation. "About work. Is that okay?" Over the next few weeks, Candy sought me out twice more. We went over the key announcements for the upcoming conference. At the end of our last meeting, as if she'd just remembered, she handed me a file. "This is a major tourism project we're collaborating on directly with the state. It hasn't been announced yet. You can break it at the conference as your own exclusive." I was silent for a moment before taking the file and thanking her. When Wallace found out, he urged me, "It seems like Ms. Hayes really values you. Maybe you should tactfully mention how Chris has been sabotaging you." I kept my eyes on the script I was editing and offered a small smile. "There's no need. Why would she cause trouble for her fiancé over a reporter she barely knows?" The day of the conference arrived. The venue was packed to capacity. The seat reserved for Candy at the center of the stage was conspicuously empty. Under the glare of the spotlights, I was in the middle of announcing the Hayes Corporation's next major partnerships when a reporter I didn't recognize shot to his feet. "Where did you steal that classified information?" he shouted. My expression hardened. My collaboration with the Hayes Corporation was conducted through proper, official channels. "Brupe." The someone who sleeps his way to the top, even know the meaning of the word. He yelled, and I have the proof. Just then, someone else walked onto the stage. It was Chris. He stared at me and let out a soft sigh. "Sonny, it's only natural for a young reporter like you to be infatuated with Candy. I wanted to let you save face, but you just don't know when to quit." On the large screen behind me, the presentation suddenly switched to a series of compromising photos. The man in them was me. "You sent him these photos," Chris continued, "and you showed up at his hotel room door late at night wearing nothing but a towel. We also have security footage of you checking into a hotel with your boss." As he spoke, the images on the screen changed again. It showed me walking into a dimly lit hotel, side by side with my boss. "You're a serial offender," Chris declared. As the room erupted in chaos, the main doors at the back of the auditorium swung open. Candy strode in, her sharp gaze sweeping across the entire hall. Her eyes passed over my face without a flicker of recognition, and my heart sank. The spotlight pinned me to the stage, making me feel like I was being publicly executed. The crowd below began to murmur loudly. "He's a disgrace to our profession. That's just disgusting. He has no ethics. He should be blacklisted." I didn't look at anyone else. My eyes were fixed on Candy. I watched as she turned to Chris and asked coolly, "What was it you were saying?" Chris pleaded, "Candy, he's been deceiving you. He posed as a reporter to get close to you, all to steal confidential data and harm the Hayes Corporation. He even slept his way into hosting this conference." Candy was silent for a moment, then her eyes found mine. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" What could I say? I could see the hatred and smug satisfaction in Chris's eyes as he looked at me. The whole situation felt utterly absurd. He was only 2 years older than me. We were full brothers. After our mother died, we should have been the closest two people in the world to each other. I let out a bitter laugh. Gripping the microphone, I spoke. "I'd like to say that your fiancée, Ms. Hayes, is lying through his teeth. If you intend to stand by and let him twist the truth simply because you love him, then I will report that fact in my press release for this event. The public has eyes. They won't trust projects led by someone with such a poor sense of judgment. Whether she was the rebellious girl from the past or the ruthless CEO she was rumored to be now, such a blatant threat should have angered her. But it didn't. She simply walked through the lights and up onto the stage, stopping a few feet away from me, our eyes level. In a voice so soft only I could hear, she said my name. Sonny Thompson. A sudden, sharp pain filled my chest. I couldn't bear to hear her make excuses for Chris. I turned my head away, speaking clearly into the microphone. All of the accusations made against me are baseless slander. My relationship with Ms. Hayes, Mr. Thompson's fiancée, has been strictly professional. We have had no private contact whatsoever. No contact. Candy's voice cut through my denial. You gave me this ring. Don't you plan on taking responsibility for me? I froze, my head snapping back to face her. She held up her left hand, showing everyone the simple silver ring on her fourth finger. It was made of cheap metal, the craftsmanship unremarkable, but she had taken such good care of it that it shone brightly under the stage lights. In an instant, that ring pulled me 4 years into the past. It was her 19th birthday. For the first 18 years of her life, her birthdays had been extravagant, spectacular events. But that year, she had nothing and no one but me. To cheer her up, I took on a couple of odd jobs between classes. With the couple $100 I earned, I bought a cheap pair of matching rings. When I got back, I took her hand and slipped one on her finger. She couldn't see it, but she could feel it. Her ears turned pink, but she tried to sound casual. "What's this?" I teased her. I saw a couple fighting on the street. They threw it on the ground, so I waited until they left and picked it up. "Hope you don't mind a hand-me-down, Miss Eris." "Don't call me that," she'd mumbled. She had clutched the cheap ring to her chest protectively. "I like it, even if it's secondhand, because it's from you." And she meant it. And all the time that followed, she never once took it off. I snapped out of memory. Candy was walking toward me, her eyes locked on mine. "Say something, Sonny." "There's nothing to say," I said quietly. "You've mistaken me for someone else, Ms. Hayes. Isn't that the engagement ring Mr. Thompson gave you?" She let out a short, sharp laugh. "I never said where it came from. How would you know that?" By the time she finished speaking, she was standing right in front of me. There was no escape. Below the stage, the whispers grew louder. "What's going on? Is she saying it was the reporter who was with her back then? Then what about Chris Thompson? You know, now that you mention it, they do look awfully similar." Chris was staring at me with pure venom in his eyes, but he forced his voice to be gentle as he tried to coax Candy. "Candy, don't let him fool you. This guy is a pathological liar. He has a history of this." I closed my eyes, forcing down the storm of emotions inside me. When I opened them again, my voice was steady. "Yes, I'm the one who gave it to her. I did it for the money. I posed as Chris, and I deceived you for 2 years. Then I took the payment and left. I've already forgotten all about it. Since you believed it was Chris all along and you're engaged to him now, what's the point of dredging this all up?" I couldn't say any more. I swallowed the lump in my throat and took a deep breath. I set down the microphone and turned to leave. But as I did, a hand closed around my wrist. The familiar warmth of her palm spread through my skin. Her voice was a low murmur. "Of course it has meaning. You told me that as long as I wore this ring, you would recognize me anywhere in the world. Is that still true?" My eyelashes fluttered. I looked down, burying every emotion deep inside me. Slowly, I pried her fingers off my wrist and pulled my hand away. When I looked up again, my face was a blank mask. I forgot. I was lying. During my years studying overseas, I thought about Candy constantly, especially during that winter when she was 19, right before she was set to return to the Hayes family. We were at the height of our passionate, secret relationship. The winter air in that city was so dry that sometimes a spark of static would jump between us when we kissed, a tiny, pleasant sting. I thought about telling her the truth more than once. There were so many moments lost in passion when she would whisper against my ear, her voice husky, "Chris, Chris, don't ever leave me." And just like that, it was like being doused with a bucket of ice water. In that instant, the reality of my situation would come crashing down. From the very beginning, I was an imposter there for shameful reasons. Candy once told me, when I was little, my cousin tricked me and locked me in a closet. I almost died in there. I hate being lied to more than anything in the world. If she ever found out the truth, she would hate me to her very core. Just before Candy's 20th birthday, her grandfather fell gravely ill. It was then that he accidentally learned the truth about what had happened. Candy had been set up from the start. Even the car accident was no accident. He sent someone to contact Chris, telling him it was time to bring Candy home. Chris showed up at my apartment. By then, he was a famous actor, and he looked down at me with an arrogant tilt of his chin. "Now that the Hayes family wants her back, you're not actually foolish enough to think you have a chance, are you? Stop dreaming." To them, to Candy, the only person they know is me, Chris Thompson. "You were always just a cheap imitation." He pulled a check from his wallet and tossed it at me. "Here's another $500,000. Stop living in a fantasy, or else I'll tell everyone the truth about what you did." I snapped my head up, glaring at him. "Chris, she was your mother, too." "My mother is Janet Miller," he sneered. "What was she?" "Just some whore." I lost control. I grabbed him by the collar and punched him twice hard. The sound brought his men rushing in from a hallway. They twisted my arms behind my back and forced me to the floor. The famous actor stood over me, looking down his nose. Was I wrong? Take the money and get the hell out of the country. Don't show your face around here again, or I swear, I'll have her scandal carved right on her headstone. He left. I stared at the check lying on the floor. My mind went back 2 years. My mother's illness had left us deep in debt. When she died, I couldn't even afford a proper burial plot for her. That's when Chris contacted me. Money. He'd scoffed before I could even finish my sentence. She only raised me for a few years. She's dead. Why should I give her a dime? I thought he was just bitter, so I tried to explain. She wanted custody of you. You were the one who cried and begged to go with Dad. Of course I wanted to go with Dad to the Miller's mansion. Do you think I'm an idiot like you? Chris's face hardened as he cut me off. What? Did you expect me to stay with you too? To live your pathetic, broke life where you can't even afford a grave when you die? I looked at him, at the face that was so much like my own. The words caught in my throat. His expression was a mask of impatience and disgust. His designer suit, the diamond cufflinks at his wrists, any single item was worth more than I could imagine. He picked up his coffee and took a slow sip before finally getting to the point. But, seeing as we are brothers, you need money, and I can give it to you. $500,000. All you have to do is pretend to be me and take care of someone. The press conference had devolved into a complete circus. I saw the crowd looking at Chris with growing suspicion. Some reporters were even turning their microphones and cameras towards him. Mr. Thompson, is what Ms. Hayes said true? Was it really Mr. Thompson here, and not you, who was with her during that time? Were all of your accusations against him fabricated? He couldn't answer. He turned to Candy, his voice pleading. Candy, you know me better than anyone. I was with you all that time. How could I do something like this? Candy looked down at him from the stage and smiled. Don't be afraid. You said you had irrefutable proof, didn't you? My lawyers are already here. Everything that has happened today is being officially recorded and documented. Her voice was soft and soothing, but Chris looked at her as if she were a monster, and he began to tremble uncontrollably. The conference was clearly over. I gathered my notes and walked off the stage. Candy followed silently behind me. It's raining, she said. Let me give you a ride. The rain was coming down in sheets. I thought about it for 3 seconds and decided not to stand on ceremony. As I settled into the passenger seat of her Rolls-Royce, I glanced over and saw a flicker of secret happiness in her eyes. Then I pulled out my phone. I realized that the entire chaotic press conference had been streamed live. It was already trending on Twitter. Under multiple hashtags, users were in a heated debate. So Chris Thompson just stole credit from that reporter? How shameless can you get? Stole credit? Who knows who's lying? That reporter is the one who sleeps his way to the top. It's been confirmed. Those photos of the reporter were photoshopped. Even if they weren't, he admitted he was paid to do a job. He did the job. He took the money. What's he got to complain about? Am I the only one who feels bad for Candy Hayes? She's being lied to by 2 terrible men. A knot formed in my stomach. I quickly locked my phone and looked out the window. Rain streamed down the glass like tiny rivers, blurring the passing city lights into a kaleidoscope of color. The city looked exactly the same as it had 3 years ago. But between Candy and me, everything had changed. Back then, the Hayes family had hired the best specialist in the country. After 2 surgeries, Candy was finally able to see again. Chris had hired bodyguards to watch me around the clock, making sure I couldn't get anywhere near the hospital to tell Candy the truth. And yet, on the day her bandages were to be removed, they brought me to the hospital themselves. I stood outside her room, unable to see her. But I could hear her voice, laced with anxiety. Chris, I'm here, Candy. Chris's voice was a low murmur. I was so worried about you. He had altered his voice, making it sound almost exactly like mine. Candy didn't seem to notice the difference. She just sounded a little disappointed. You promised you'd be the first person I saw when I could see again. You broke your promise. I didn't stay to hear anymore. A sharp, sudden pain shot through my chest, so intense it almost consumed me. From the very beginning, in Candy's world, the man who had been by her side for 2 years was Chris Thompson. Not me. Not Sonny Thompson. Chris's bodyguards dragged me into an empty waiting room. A few moments later, Chris's new mother, Janet Miller, walked in, her expression as haughty as ever. Chris had a small cut on his lip that was still bleeding. Candy kissed me, he gloated. She really loves me. She can't live without me. He told me, his voice dripping with condescension. "You did a good job taking care of her these past 2 years. But as far as she's concerned, I was the one who did everything. Someone as insignificant as you could never, ever be with someone like her. Where are you headed?" "Home." Candy's voice snapped me out of my reverie. I kept my head slightly bowed. "Could you drop me at the office, Miss Hayes? I still have some work to finish." But she didn't start the car. Instead, she leaned across the console, one hand on the steering wheel. She looked almost hurt. "Sonny, do you have to be so formal with me?" Her familiar scent, mixed with the clean smell of rain, was so close. It threatened to pull me back into the vortex of memories. In that moment, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I pushed her back gently and looked at her, my voice cold. "What should I call you then? Miss Hayes? Candy? Or should I wait until I'm bleeding on the ground for you, just so I can hear you cry out Chris's name again?" She was speechless. "Those 2 years are over. The man you were engaged to was always Chris. Your life is back on track, so why are you bothering me now?" "But this isn't my life," Candy said, her eyes turning red. "I had never even met Chris before all this. From the very beginning, the only person I knew was you." A deep, solid ache spread through my chest. I closed my eyes, and when I spoke, my voice trembled. "You're still lying. Candy, I was there. Outside your hospital room on the day you could see again. I heard you. You accepted Chris as me without a single question. You hugged him, you kissed him." "I didn't," she cut in sharply. "The very second I opened my eyes, I knew he wasn't you." I stared at her, stunned into silence. I heard Candy's voice, steady and calm. "The Hayes family is a complicated place. In that hospital room with me were several people who wanted me dead. The moment I realized he wasn't you, I made a decision. Chris was the perfect target." A sharp, dangerous smile touched her lips. "He loves to play the part of an imposter, doesn't he? I decided to let him play it to the fullest." My mind flashed back to news headlines I'd seen while I was overseas. One said Chris was nearly killed in an on-set explosion that turned out to be real. Another reported that a massive billboard had fallen and nearly crushed him while he was out with Candy. "I didn't ignore you on purpose," she said softly. "A lot has happened these past 3 years. After my grandfather died, members of my own family came out of the woodwork, one after another, trying to kill me. They're all either in prison now or in the ground. That included my own mother. I'm not afraid of dying. When my cousin stabbed me after I forced him to sign over his shares, I barely felt it. In that moment, all I could think was, I missed you." The parking garage was silent. In the dim glow of the car's interior lights, she unbuttoned her blazer, revealing a thin, pale scar on her chest, right over her heart. "The Hayes family is a snake pit. Taking control wasn't easy, but it's okay. After today, Chris and the last of the people who were backing him will be finished. The entire Hayes empire, including me, can be yours." She leaned closer, her eyes searching mine. The eyes that had once been a cloudy, unfocused gray were now as bright and clear as a starry night. I swallowed hard. "But you and Chris." "I never kissed him. Not once," she said, her voice firm. "In my entire life, you're the only person I've ever kissed." That one sentence was all it took. The last thread of my restraint snapped. As I pulled her to me, a flood of memories of all our passionate moments together washed over me. Her darkest days had also been the most uncertain and lost years of my own life. All of that raw, unvented emotion had found its release in the desperate, passionate way we clung to each other. By the time our own storm had passed, it was late. Kenny drove us to a house in the suburbs. I checked my phone and saw a headline on Twitter with a bright red breaking tag. Hashtag Chris Thompson detained for questioning. "Last month," Candy explained, "my half-brother contacted him. He threatened to expose Chris's secrets unless he stole bidding documents and other classified files from me." I was quiet for a moment. "I know," I said softly. "You know." She turned to me sharply. "Did you arrange that, Sonny?" I nodded, digging my nails into my palm to ground myself as I met her gaze. "I came back to destroy the Miller family, to destroy Chris, and to clear my mother's name from the lies they spread 20 years ago. I was willing to do whatever it took to make that happen. It was the main reason I went into journalism. 20 years ago, a young Janet Miller decided she wanted my father. So she set a trap for my mother, framing her for prostitution. And Chris, just a little boy, helped them do it, all so he could live a life of luxury. He personally helped push his own mother into that abyss. My mother was held in jail for 15 days. She lost her job. When she came home, the neighbors whispered and pointed, all of them taking my father's side. After my parents divorced, my mother took me and moved back to her small hometown, burdened by that shameful, false accusation. She fell into a deep depression and died from illness just after her 50th birthday. The day she died, the news was on the TV in her hospital room. It was a story about the Miller family. They were described as a model couple with a brilliant son, the perfect picture of a happy, successful family. It was a joke. When my mother died, she weighed less than 100 pounds. Her hands were a mass of purple bruises from 4 needles. She should have lived a long, full life. The Millers' business empire was built on dirty deals that hurt countless people. How could they be called a model family? I covered my eyes, forcing back the tears. Candy, I used you. I knew you would never forgive a betrayal, so I made sure Chris would betray you in a way you couldn't ignore. If you're hurt by that, if you hate me for it, I understand. But I had to be the one to send him to hell. I pushed down every emotion, forcing myself to look at her calmly. But Sonny, she said softly, your hands are shaking. She took my hand, which I clenched behind my back, and gently brought it to her lips for a soft kiss. Don't be scared. The fact that you used me makes me happy. It means you were thinking of me. Of course I'm on your side. I told you before, the entire Hayes empire, including me, is yours. The news about Chris's arrest dominated Twitter for 3 days straight. The Miller family, desperate to control the narrative, came to Candy for help. She listened to their pleas from behind her large desk and then smiled. That's a very touching story. But as for what happens next, I'm afraid that's up to my fiancé. My father and his wife, Janet Miller, turned and saw me. The color drained from their faces. I gave him a small smile. You two should probably start preparing, because very soon you'll be joining him. Candy held another press conference to clarify her relationship with Chris. When asked about him, she replied with a wry smile, my fiancé. I never said it was him. I was always referring to the man who was actually there, taking care of me. A reporter called out, but wasn't he only there because Chris Thompson paid him to be? The smile remained on Candy's lips, but her eyes turned to ice. I'd advise you to choose your words carefully. There are plenty of rich people in the world. Why would he take money to care for me, specifically? It's because he loves me. The reporter fell silent, and sitting beside her on the stage, so did I. After the press conference, the story took on a life of its own. I released the audio recordings from my first meetings with Chris. She's blind and a disowned heiress. Who would want to be saddled with that? She only raised me for a few years. She's dead. Why should I give her a dime? Did you expect me to stay with you too? To live your pathetic, broke life where you can't even afford a grave when you die? The public outcry was immediate and fierce. No way. I thought his whole brand was being this classy, generous guy. So he and Sonny Thompson are brothers, and he's the one who paid his own brother to take his place? He wears outfits worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, but wouldn't pay for his own mother's grave. That's disgusting. Riding the wave of public outrage, I started a live stream. In front of over 1 million viewers, I told them the truth of what happened 20 years ago. The Miller family's heiress, Janet Miller, wanted my father. Instead of just getting a divorce, they conspired to frame my mother, to ruin her reputation and force her to live the rest of her life in shame. Standing behind me was a nervous-looking man with a buzz cut. I'd spent years through grad school and my internship tracking him down, finally getting a lead from a former colleague. He had a history of petty crime and had been in and out of prison. That thing back then, he said, his voice shaking. Janet Miller paid me to do it. Mrs. Thompson, she was innocent. Her own son tricked her into coming to a party at the Miller's house. They got her drunk, and I helped her to her room and planted a stack of cash under her pillow. Janet Miller had already called the police. Before my mother, who had been deliberately plied with alcohol, could even wake up, the police burst in to raid the place. Even today, it is terrifyingly easy to frame a woman, to spread vicious rumors and destroy her reputation. And it was even easier back then. I chose to become a journalist for a reason, and it wasn't just for this one case. I will dedicate my life to fighting for justice for all those who have been wrongfully accused. The live stream was the final nail in the Miller family's coffin. Their business had been built on shady dealings from the very beginning. Now, with federal investigators cracking down, they had walked right into the line of fire. It was never me propping them up, Candy explained later. It was my dear half-brother. Our companies only had a few joint projects, which I can easily divest from. It won't affect me at all. I was finally able to breathe a sigh of relief. I handed over all the evidence I had collected over the years to the authorities. Thankfully, when Candy took over the Hayes Corporation, she had cleanly severed all ties with those people. She wasn't implicated in any of it. The day the Miller family's empire finally crumbled, I brought a bouquet of flowers and took Candy to visit my mother's grave. In the photograph on the headstone, her smile was as gentle as I remembered, but it was tinged with a deep sadness. She was a kind, gentle woman who had truly loved my father. And because of that love, she never truly recovered from the betrayal. Right before she died, I told Candy she was lying in her hospital bed, and she squeezed my hand and made me promise not to blame Chris. She said, "Your brother isn't a true Miller. Life must be very difficult for him there." My mother never knew. She never knew that for all those years, Chris had built his life in that family by demeaning and insulting her memory, using it to curry favor with Janet Miller and secure his position. He had been rotting from the inside out since the day he first stepped into that house. I looked at the photo on the headstone. "Mom, no one will ever believe those lies about you again. I have a good career now and a girlfriend." Standing beside me, Candy quietly corrected me. "Fiancé." "All right, I conceded fiancé." I unconsciously twisted the matching silver ring on my finger. I had hidden it at the bottom of my suitcase when I went abroad, thinking I would never have the chance to wear it again. I straightened the flowers, stood, and bowed my head. When I turned, Candy was looking at me intently. "Sonny, could you wait for me in the car? I'd like to speak with your mother alone for a moment." The autumn air was cool. I waited in the car for a long time before Candy returned. Her coat was damp with evening dew. I turned to her. "What did you say to her?" She started the engine. She was quiet for a long moment before she answered. "I just thanked her for bringing you into this world. If she hadn't, I would have died in the summer 5 years ago when I had nothing left to live for." After the dust settled, I was officially hired and even received a small promotion. I started taking on my own assignments. My first major story was about a high school girl who had been relentlessly bullied for over a year by a group of wealthy students. She had jumped from the roof of the school. "Those kids come from powerful families. No one wants to cross them," my boss said, hesitating. "If you don't want to take this on." "Of course I'll take it," I interrupted. I took the file. "Perfect. I'm actually already drafting a proposal for a broader anti-bullying advocacy campaign. I'll send it to you this afternoon." It was a rare opportunity. With Candy's power and resources, we could make a real difference. With her backing me, I intended to make the most of it. The interview and the subsequent campaign kept me buried in work for weeks. I barely saw Candy. She'd send me 20 messages, and I'd manage to reply with a single emoji in between bites of a sandwich while scrolling through social media feeds for the campaign. One night, she told me she had a surprise waiting and that I had to come home. I pushed open the door to our apartment. Outside, the night sky was full of stars. Inside, the air was warm and steamy. She was looking at me, her gaze clinging to me like honey. The only light came from a small bedside lamp and the moonlight pouring through the window like liquid silver. But nothing could cool the humid heat in the room. "Sonny," she whispered, "kiss me." "Don't be so nervous, you idiot." Her words, mixed with the languid look in her eyes, were pure seduction. By the time our own storm passed, the sky outside was already beginning to lighten. I suddenly remembered something. I have to go out of town next month for an important story. It's about a young girl in a remote mountain town who's been systematically abused by the entire community. She walked all night through the mountains just to get to an internet cafe to contact me. It's a very isolated place, and the local power structures are deeply entrenched. It's not going to be an easy story to report, so I'll probably be there for a while. She sat up abruptly. "That sounds dangerous." "Maybe," I said, unconcerned, as I sat up and poured her a glass of water. Seeing the look in her eyes, I tried to reassure her. "I'll be as careful as I can. But this is the job. It's our responsibility as journalists." Candy was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm coming with you. But don't you have that major contract negotiation next week? It could be postponed." "But why?" "You really don't have to." I tried to reason with her, but the rest of my words were cut off by her fervent kiss. Her lips traveled down my jaw to my neck, her breath warm against my skin. She whispered, "Because I'm your most loyal protector. You just focus on changing the world. I'll be there to make sure you're safe."